There are 9 things I wish I knew about when first learning piano, and the first one has to be using the right fingers at the right time. Here's an example of what it's going to sound like if you don't pay attention to finger technique. Now here's what it's going to sound like paying attention to using the right fingers. As you could hear, when I paid attention to the finger numbers, I was able to play a lot more fluidly and I made a lot less mistakes and it sounded more musical. The second thing I wish I knew about when first learning piano actually has to do with a story I had back in college. I was playing the piano one time and I played through my piece and my professor said, "Tim, you gotta stop playing with your fingertips." And I said, "What? Like, did you hit your head this morning?" And no, they didn't hit their head. This is actually what they meant. So what my teacher was talking about is instead of using finger strength, which sounds rather robotic and not good, they were talking about using arm weight. So when you're coming in, you don't want to use your finger to hammer on to make the sound. You want to be dropping your arm. And as you play, you want to be gently lifting your arm and dropping it when you need. So like this. Playing with arm weight is also really good at playing articulations like staccato. Because if I did it with just the fingers, it sounds robotic and it actually creates a lot of finger strain. So if you find yourself playing piano and your hands really tensing up, start working on using your arm weight instead. The third thing I wish I knew was to learn your chords in the beginning, because they not only help you play pop songs that you probably want to play, they're also going to help you play your classical songs as well. Here's an example of how chords can come in handy. So if you're learning these pop songs, these easier ones, they actually don't write in the left hand at all. They just really write in the right hand. And instead write up these little chord symbols, C right here or A minor in the second measure. And you're going to have to know those chords. And if you do know them, you can just play them with your left hand and it's going to sound like this. By knowing my chords, I was able to play that pretty much from sight. Some of the chords that you want to become familiar with are major chords, which sounds bright and happy, minor chords, which sound sad, diminished chords, which sound diminished or scary, I guess, and then augmented, they sound kind of mysterious, but also tense. So if it has a real tense sound, it's diminished or augmented. So you need to know those 4, and those are called triads. Those are 3-note chords. 1, 2, 3. Now, there's another type of triad I would be aware of that's used in pop music a lot, and that is the suspension chord. So you have something like this, and then one of the chord notes moves to another note. That is usually a suspension, and it suspends. The reason it's called suspension is you're suspending this 3rd note to the 4th note, and then moving to the 3rd note. I would also know about 7ths, specifically major 7th, dominant 7th, minor 7th, half diminished 7th, and fully diminished 7th. And if you're confused and you want to know about all these chords, don't worry, I have a lot of other lessons on the channel, but that's not what this lesson's entirely about. So let's continue. Number 4, this one is super important, so pay attention. Once you learn a topic, like how to read music, chords, anything, you have to keep practicing that or you will forget. So I have another second story time of the video. I was learning how to play piano. Gee, imagine that. It's probably like 7 years old, 6 or 7 years old. I had learned my treble clef, practiced all the flashcards and stuff. Learned my bass clef, practiced all the flashcards and stuff. And we started working on lesson books. And early on in those lesson books, it's a lot of like right hand only stuff. You might have 1 or 2 left hand notes, but then that does change pretty quick. And before you know it, I actually had a lot of left hand heavy songs. And guess what? I actually forgot how to read the bass clef, at least a lot of the notes. So the moral of the story is once you learn something, it doesn't matter what it is, it has to be a regular part of your practice. I still practice note reading sometimes, except I do it on a level above that on something called sight reading, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. And here's a little tip for you. You might be practicing pieces for a while and you might get kind of frustrated and tired of practicing pieces. Well, guess what? It's totally fine to have like a theory review day or an ear training review day to really give yourself a chance to review some of these important topics. And then you can go back to practicing piano on another day when you're feeling more up to it. The fifth thing I wish I knew about, and I talked about it just a second ago, is sight reading. Sight reading is being able to play through a piece of music for the very first time and make as few mistakes as possible. Here are 6 tips to help you with sight reading. Number 1 is to sight read below your current playing level. If you're playing something like Beethoven sonatas, you're probably not going to be sight reading Beethoven sonatas. You might be sight reading Fur-Elise or something a bit easier. And if you're working on Fur-Elise, you probably want to be sight reading like Mary Had a Little Lamb. Tip number 2 is to analyze before you play. And I would look out for time signature, key signature, different chords you can pick out, accidentals, and some tricky areas. Which brings me into the third point, which is take note of tricky areas. Do you see like a ledger line that goes way down and then it goes way back up? Well, take a moment to really analyze that even before you get playing. You don't need to start playing in any time limit unless you're like in a competition or something. But even when I used to play for what they called juries at the end of the semester for school, the professors would give you like as much time really as you wanted to look over the piece of music and then play. Most people didn't take the time because they were so nervous. Might be my personal experience. But just to tell you that you can take as much time to pick out all those tricky areas before you start playing, which takes us to tip number 5. That's 5, is play much slower than normal, right? There's no time limit. And again, unless you're in a competition, but nobody cares if you play it slower. It's all about getting it right. The next tip is to sight read every day to get better. And the last tip is to get a sight reading book like this one. This one's called Improve Your Sight Reading. It is by Paul Harris, and there are 8 levels of it, and you can get it on Amazon. So we're going to do a sight reading example. I'm going to sight read example number 1 here. And even before I start playing, I'm on the lookout for time signature. We have 4/4 time signature, 4 beats in a measure. I'm going to internalize that pulse before I begin to play by going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, ready, play. Bum, 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 bum. And then I have a consistent tempo coming into it and making sure I'm holding all the notes for the right values. Also looking at places of rest. This will get everybody. This spot right here in the first measure where that rest is. What a lot of students will do is they'll kind of hold on to some of the notes from before. So just be careful when you have rests. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, ready, play. 4. Make sure you count that whole note at the end, and then I'm just kind of giving a glance after I play it just to see if I messed everything up. Looks like everything's good, and then I'd move on to number 2. The 6th thing I wish I knew about when first learning piano was how to practice, and specifically this one thing. Are you ready for it? Being objective. A lot of people practice. They might go through their lesson book. They may practice a couple of scales or whatever, but there's no real rhyme or reason, right? They just know like, I'm supposed to work on this or this. They're not thinking like, okay, I messed up on the A major scale last time, so I should probably start the A major scale and clean it up this time. And that way I make sure that I get something meaningful done during my lesson. And then instead of playing all of my piece, I'm just going to play the hard section of the piece. This is what it means to be objective. So what I recommend you do is you get out a piece of paper and you write down your objectives each practice. Write down what are you struggling with and what should you be working on first. And be objective and go down the list and bang out each one. And then once you've worked out all the important stuff, then you can noodle around, play the stuff you want to play. I do recommend you add stuff to your practice session that you really genuinely love to play, but you got to practice it at the end. You got to get the hard stuff done first. So the one thing I really wish I knew about was to be objective when you practice. Being objective, if you have 10 minutes, here's an example. You have 10 minutes to practice and you bing, bang, boom, hit each of those things. Are you going to make more or less practice than somebody that practices for an hour and just goofs around. You're going to make more progress in that 10 minutes. And then at the end of your practice session, make sure you go down to your list and check off what you got right, what you got wrong, and write down for next time what you're struggling with and start with those things when you practice. I also highly recommend putting things at the top of your list that you normally neglect. For instance, I tend to neglect doing my dishes, so I write that on my list like really early in the day to make sure that I actually do it. Something that a student once told me that blew my mind was the ledger line rules. And I actually wish I knew this from the very beginning because it makes it so much easier. Rule number 1, the lines of a staff are equal to the spaces going up off the staff. So if that bottom line is an E, this is also an E. This is G to G, B to B, D, and F. So the lines are equal to the spaces going up off the staff from that top space. So remember that. E, G, B, D, F, E, G, B, D, F. The inverse is true. The lines on a staff are equal to the spaces going down below the staff, starting from the bottom space, but in reverse order. So this time, this F is right here, and they're going to line up right that with this one being G and this one being E. Ledger line rule number 2. The spaces on the staff are equal to the lines going up off the staff from the top line. So this would be FACE, and this would be FACE. And for this one, the inverse is also true, FACE, and this is FACE, but you got to be careful to go in reverse order since we're going down this time. So it would actually be ECAF. And the same is true actually for the bass clef. You just got to remember to use the bass clef lines or spaces. There's a rhythm rule I wish I knew right from the beginning, and it's this. Quick, look at this rhythm and tell me where all 4 beats are. They're right here, of course. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And how did I know that so quick? Well, by this rule. When notes are beamed together, like this and like this, 99% of the time, I know there's somebody in the comments going to tell me about the 1% of the time. I already know about it. 99% of the time, when notes are beamed together in rhythms, it means that those notes equal 1 beat. This is especially true in simple time signatures like 4/4, 2/4, and 3/4, but there is one exception. And the exception is, and I don't know why they do this, it makes me so angry, is when they have 4 eighth notes in a row, they just beam them all across, even though there's technically 2 beats here. So this is the only exception that you're going to find, at least in early piano music, to this. If you see 4 eighth notes beamed together, it's actually 2 beats. But any other time, especially with trickier stuff, just know that that all equals 1 beat and that all equals 1 beat. And it actually helps out a ton when quickly going through rhythms. Of course, you want to double check every once in a while, but trust me, it helps take a lot of the guesswork and makes things a lot easier when understanding rhythm. I have one final tip to rule them all, but first, I just want to say thank you so much to all those that have supported the channel over the years, from the regular watchers to the channel members to the mods to people that enroll in courses over on my website, pianolessonsontheweb.com. Thank you so much for your support. Okay, like I promised, I have one final tip to rule them all, but we got to have a heart-to-heart about something, because there's something that's going to come up in your piano practice experience, and we just need to talk about it because it could make or break you as a piano player. What I want to talk about, of course, is staying motivated in the long run. When you're first learning piano, likely you're going to make a lot of progress in the beginning because the topics in the beginning are easier, at least for some of us. Some of us, it still might take some time. But what'll happen is you'll make all this progress, and then it'll start getting harder. The pieces will get harder, the stuff you're learning will get harder, and it will plateau and even off, and your motivation will go the opposite way. It will go way down. But fear not, because these things are totally normal, both losing motivation or just hitting plateaus in your progress, or even regression sometimes. Just know that this is an important part of the experience, an important part of long-term success. Success for me, even on YouTube, has always been 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 steps forward, one step back. Sometimes it's one step forward and two steps back, and then I have to kind of re-strategize what I'm doing, which brings another great point. When you're practicing and you're like, I just feel like I've been practicing for the last couple of months and I'm not really getting better at anything. That means you need to re-strategize your practice routine. Rethink about what you've been working on. Have you really been working on the stuff that's going to make you long-term results like music theory, ear training, sight reading, or have you just been noodling around? You might have to get some self-reflection time in and really figure out where you've been going wrong and adjust course. But I want to let you know that feeling frustrated and having your progress plateau at times is a totally normal thing. And the key is, are you ready for it? To just push through, keep practicing, and really importantly, try to remember why you started in the first place. This can either be writing it down, like, okay, I started because I really wanted to impress my grandmother or something. You never know. Everybody has a different reason. Or you might be like, oh, there's that artist that I heard and it just really blew me away and I want to be like them. I want to be like Lady Gaga or something. So you might want to listen to Lady Gaga, either her playing or maybe speeches or something that you can really reconnect with your roots and remember why you started doing this in the first place, and it will keep you going through the hard times. The ninth thing I wish I knew about when first learning piano are all the little tricks on how to read music super fast. I was just doing the old, like, every good boy deserves fries thing for the longest time, and it actually took me so much longer to read the notes. There's actually a lot of other tricks you can use to read notes lightning fast, and you can learn about them right here, because of course I have you covered with another lesson. So this is the lesson you want to watch right after this one. It has all the techniques you need to read music the best you possibly can. It's been your piano teacher Tim here. Thanks for coming by, and I'll see you next time.
Some of the old songs, Sam.
Yes, ma'am.